think my response will kind of connect both questions, but so two things. When it comes to the narrative is, I think there's so much work on physical violence, and it's very important to also kind of highlight the impact of emotional violence. And in fact, it does more harm than we can possibly imagine. And of course, the way in which the global pandemic also, even though you might not be physically in the same space with somebody, violence can still take place, abuse can still take place, psychological, of course, or emotional abuse can still take place, right? And another thing that I think it's also important to highlight is the fact that there's so much work on the experiences of African Americans, but of course, there isn't so much emphasis on the experiences of non-native victims like African students. So I'm not just even talking about Africans now, because there are Africans who are resident, there are Africans who are citizens in the United States. How about Africans who are students, right? Who are schooling in the United States, who cannot actually afford the kind of expensive therapy or counseling services available. We just have to make use of the services at their universities, right? And of course, even if the counselor does not is not someone that you want to, interact with, you have no choice because your mental health is killing you. So you have to just make use of what is available. So, I mean, these are some of the issues that this study is bringing to the fore. And lastly, I would also like to say that this study is important because it is also bringing about the need to rethink available legal assistance framework. Because when we think about abuse, we think about there's a legal concept called in personam juris ducam, which is the idea that you can prosecute someone if the person is within the same space. If an abuser is in the same space with the abused, then you can prosecute, right? How about someone who is 1,000 miles away from you, yet is causing you harm because there is internet, because there is Facebook, there is Snapchat. I mean, these platforms are there. And so we need to begin to engage the law in a way that we're not just thinking about abuse as a small thing. It is so much, it's a big deal. And we need to begin to rethink what exactly is impersonal jurisdiction. How about we kick away all of this, existing narratives and begin to create new ways of thinking about the law, and even see abuse as a global crime, not something that has to be punished or prosecuted within a particular jurisdiction. I hope that makes sense.
It makes beautiful sense. And you just spoke to something.
Yeah, I just wanted to share how this research is constantly, I wouldn't say used to, because it's an ongoing process for me, because every day I keep learning and I keep thinking about new ways to actually think about this process and how, I can bring into limelight the experiences of African student victims of abuse. One of the things that this process kind of exposed me to seeing and paying attention to is the absence of inclusive representation when it comes to the population of counselors or those who counsel non-native victims, right? So I think now in addition to what I just said, I think another thing that I then realized in this process is the fact that I had certain assumptions, before I entered into that scene of receiving help, right? And which is something that reflexivity leads us to do. Before you enter into a research scene or a research process, you have some assumptions. And so the process kind of opens your eyes to seeing new things. And so one of the things that I saw in this process is the fact that even I, as a person, also had some assumptions about what an American counselor should look like, should sound like, should behave, or how he or she would behave, or whether they are going, an American counselor would not be responsive, would not be caring. Those were the assumptions that I had. But one interesting thing that I discovered in this process was humanity kind of trumped so many of these assumptions that I had. Because, for instance, I had a counselor who was just too kind. I mean, there were times that I would begin to say, "Hello, what is going on here?" And so, if I am thinking that way, is it the same thing for other African student victims, or is it just an assumption on my part? And so, this whole process is something that can also help other, non-natives, not necessarily Africans, whether you're Latin America or you are Latino or you're from other parts of the world, and then you come to the United States or you're thinking of receiving any form of counseling generally. This I think it's important to also highlight that, in yes, you might have your doubts, yes, you might have your concerns, but if there is research to show that, oh, even though you do not have the same identities, it is still possible to receive help and still be able to open up to your counselor, which is a major concern for people who are going through, intimate or family violence generally. People do not report their experiences. In one of the literatures that I engaged with, people don't want to get help because they are afraid. I mean, they're thinking about their identity, their culture, or how the other person is going to perceive them. So if through this process and moving forward, one is able to highlight the fact that you might not have the same social construct or identities, but it's still possible to get help and find counselors that are willing and able to help you. So even when we think about law, when we think about people getting legal assistance, when we think about people even calling 911 or trying to get help, generally there's this concern about identity, this concern about who I am and who that person is, and the power and the being a minority or being from a non-dominant culture. So these are the different, issues that I think this research is helping me to engage, and which of course can also help to inform policy and change some of these stereotypes and stereotypes that we have held so strongly to for several years.
That was so well said, and
Yeah.
I don't want to, we could keep going all day and keep talking about these really important topics and our processes and research. But in the respect of everybody.
And that was how we ended it. Glory. I was so worried. Was it gonna be good? Will I do well? How am I gonna perform? But God made it so easy for me. Elédùmarè, mo dúpẹ́, mo dúpẹ́, mo dúpẹ́, mo dúpẹ́. Orí mi ẹlẹ́dàá mi, mo dúpẹ́. What I just said is, I am grateful, Lord. I'm grateful, Lord. I'm grateful to my Maker. I'm grateful to my Maker. I'm grateful to my Maker. God, I am grateful. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, guys. I hope you enjoyed my presentation and leave me some good vibes in the comment section. Take care. Abundance is here.